Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me. My name is Andy Wyman. I've met some of you before. And some of you have met my partner also, Frank Coppola. Frank was supposed to be here today, but he got called away to a family thing in New Jersey. But that doesn't mean you won't be seeing him and hearing from him in our presentation today. And so I know that Frank probably I know we met a lot of you at the picnic from just a couple of weeks ago. And so, what we wanted to be able to talk to you guys about today is something that's kind of, a cause that's near and dear to both of us. And that's contractors gone wild, right? So I'm an attorney by trade. I own a law firm in Boca Raton, and we're a construction law firm. What makes us a little different from all the others, though, is that we focus almost exclusively on helping homeowners who have hired bad contractors. And those jobs that are taking too long, costing too much, the work isn't good. Maybe the guy's unlicensed, they're not pulling permits. It's one of those, homeowners tend to be kind of the forgotten people in construction, litigation and construction disputes. They're very unprotected, unfortunately. And so we've taken on that cause on the legal end of things in order to be able to, help them through what is some very serious problems, very serious issues that affect the way they live, go about enjoying their lives on a day in and day out basis. So, and my partner is Frank Coppola. He's not my partner at my law firm, but Frank is a Florida certified master builder. And he and I together have a sort of this niche where we help these owners that have been stuck in these nightmare renovations or custom home builds. We help them sort of figure out where they're at, gather the information they need to move forward. Maybe it's terminating their builder or contractor and moving forward with their project and getting them across the finish line. It's kind of these rescue, call in the cavalry kind of projects. So, he and I are, out there fighting the good fight for the people. And so, a little bit about me, with the work that we do, we're very consumer focused, right? So that means that our firm has been nominated and I've been nominated as for 2025 Florida Bar Consumer Protection Attorney of the Year for the work that we do for our homeowner clients. And so, we've been, our firm is a fast growing law firm in Boca Raton, and we do work all over the state for these types of people. And fortunately and unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are kind of stuck in these really bad situations. Frank Coppola, who many, like I said, of you have met, he is currently campaigning for Secretary of the Florida Home Builders Association. It's not why he's not here today, but he's not here today because of family reasons. But Frank, would love to talk to you about Taekwondo and his favorite wife, Miranda, and that big old military vehicle he had at your picnic. So as I said, we're working, helping these people. I do it on the legal side, Frank on the ground, and helping these people through these problems they've got with these projects that are draining their finances, draining their emotions, and draining their lives. So, we help them and we relieve them of the chaos associated with these projects. And so today, what I want to kind of talk to you about is we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to kind of go through some of these real life examples of these contractors gone wild, we call them, and how it is affecting certain members of our community, certain homeowners and citizens. We're going to talk about the role of building officials and how your work influences these disputes, and how I'm going to talk to you about how these disputes kind of arise between the owner and the contractor. It's not always as simple as you think it is, but there's a lot of red flags out there, telltale signs, things we see. And I want to talk to you about those because in the position you're in as building officials, a lot of you are in a position to see these kinds of things happening in real time with some of these projects. And that puts you in a very unique position to be able to help maybe reduce the risk that these of what I call, and Frank and I call lawfare, right? It's warfare, and there's legal involved in this. We call it lawfare. It's really where the project has devolved to such a point that there's litigation, there's license complaints, there may be criminal charges. I mean, all of those sorts of things that nobody envisions their project getting to when they've hired this contractor in the first place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how your work influences these sort of disputes for better and for worse. There are things that are, when we've got some of these unscrupulous contractors out there, I feel like they kind of take advantage of the system a little bit. And I want to kind of point out a couple of things we've observed and clients complain to us about on how they, how the officials are dealing with some of the issues that are seen out there. And then, how you guys can step in and ultimately be the heroes in these stories for a lot of these people. So I think first, when we say contractor gone wild, I mean, I think we've all kind of heard a lot of the horror stories that you get in Florida. But realistically, what I'm actually talking about is someone who is contracting, and I don't want to say a contractor, but someone who is contracting sometimes with a license and sometimes without a license, who deviates so far from professional and ethical and contractual and statutory and quality standards of care that the owners who hire them are left devastated. I mean, they're left devastated financially, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically because of the stress and because of the problems that they've encountered when they unfortunately hire the wrong contractor. And so, some of the things that, we all see on some of these jobs, and we get every month between 50 and 100 homeowners who call us with problems with their contractors. And, like I said, we do work all over the state. And some of these are small and they're simple, yet some of these can be really eye-opening and mind-blowing when you hear the position that some of these people get into. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of the psychology of some of these homeowners and how they've let themselves get into these positions in the first place and to let themselves be victimized by some of these contractors. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm anti-contractor. We represent contractors too, and there's a lot of really good contractors out there. But the ones that are just like lawyers, there's good ones, there's bad ones, and there's the ones that all the jokes are made about, and there's the ones that you give the rest of the good guys the bad reputations and the bad names. So, and look, my dad was a contractor, my grandfather was a contractor, so we would always have these nice little back and forth, contractor versus lawyer sort of discussions at Thanksgiving, of course. So, but yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about kind of what the homeowner's journey, right? When they get into these projects in the first place, I mean, they're obviously super happy and excited when it first starts. And as if they're dealing with one of these, contractors gone wild, a little concern steps in. Ultimately dissatisfaction and then frustration. And all the way down here at the very end is what we call lawfare, right? And Frank and I, we operate in this space here between frustration and lawfare, where the homeowners are beyond frustrated with what they've been dealing with these contractors. And that's the sweet spot for Frank and I, where we like to jump in and help people out. But of course, the goal is to prevent these from getting to that place, getting there in the first place. So in order to be able to kind of explain where you fit in that process from our perspective, I think it's important to kind of understand how do these projects get to that point in the first place, right? So when we talk about like new home builds or we're talking about renovations, I'm not talking about the new home builds where people who hired GL Homes or Pulte or they bought a house from Lennar, like those sort of projects. There's very little involvement that the homeowner has on a day-to-day basis. They get the call one day, your house is ready, we want you to close tomorrow. So that's one situation. But really the situations that we deal with are these more custom homes where the home builder and the owner are very involved together, or the owner should be more involved in the project than they are, and the builder or the contractor is kind of taking advantage of that void. And so, so basically, and some of this stuff you'll see today is just so outrageous, but it's stuff that we deal with all the time. Obviously, very promising at the beginning, right? It's a design phase, it's plans, it's excitement, it's hope, it's everyone is picturing how they're going to enjoy their new kitchen, how they're going to enjoy their outside kitchen, the Christmas they're going to have at their house when their family comes this Christmas, because the project's only going to take a few months and we'll be in by September, and then Christmas will come around and the family really will enjoy it. But then a deposit gets made, and ultimately, when you have a contractor that is sort of one of these rogue contractors, this is kind of immediately where things start to fall apart, right? There's generally no communication coming from the contractor. There are a lot of broken promises and initially unexpected delays in the permit process. And a lot of times what we discover is that these contractors like to blame you guys, right? They like to blame the building officials for not processing the permit applications quickly enough. It takes 4 to 6 months. It takes, whatever it might be. They tell these stories to the homeowners to buy themselves more time to do whatever it is they're going to do. And so, so these homeowners, admittedly, a lot of them are really just not knowledgeable about how this process works. They don't really understand. They rely upon the contractor to tell them what needs a permit and what doesn't need a permit. And a lot of them, sometimes that conversation happens. Hey, this needs a permit, but that'll add this much extra time and this much extra money. Let's, we can skip it. Or sometimes, the homeowners truly don't know. They truly don't know that something needed a permit and they relied on the contractor to tell them, and the contractor mentions nothing about it. But there's very often there are delays and some lies and misrepresentations made by the contractor. Some of them seem like they're little white lies, right? Things you're going to kind of, yeah, we submitted the application for the permit. It turns out they didn't. Or, yeah, we'll have somebody there on Monday to start demolition. Monday comes and goes. You don't hear from the contractor. Then it's Tuesday, Wednesday. You're calling, you're following up, you're emailing, you're texting. And ultimately, it's not until the next week somebody shows up. It's two guys. They show up for 4 hours and they leave. And so trust starts to erode at this point, right? So there's, I like to tell these homeowners how, these contractors, how they do anything is how they do everything. And so, if they're going to start making little white lies at the very beginning and making misrepresentations about lying to you about, or making excuses for what they did or didn't do, you can expect that's going to continue throughout the job. And that's just kind of the way they do business. And so, the problem kind of gets worse as the work starts. Generally the work is not up to snuff. The work is not up to standard. It's not what they were envisioning as far as a quality of work is concerned. And a lot of that is due to unskilled labor, unfortunately. And look, the labor market's tough, right? The labor market is really tough for these contractors to get enough good workers there to do the work. But the homeowner is seeing this and watching this in real time unfold in their home, the work being done and not being up to standard. And then they want to try to talk to somebody about this. And there's generally a lack of supervision. And I'm not even talking about from the license holder. Half the time, more than half the time, the license holder is not in the picture at all anyway. But there's hopefully at least some kind of supervisor who is, or somebody dedicated that you as a homeowner could talk to voice your concerns, voice your questions. And, a lot of times these more rogue contractors will absolutely not want you as the homeowners to talk to the workers that are on site. And I get it, right? The homeowner shouldn't be trying to direct the work and looking over the shoulder of the person that's sitting there, cutting the baseboards. But realistically, somebody needs to. And a lot of times these contractors are not, and they're not watching over it. So it leaves the homeowner feeling like they're almost GCing the job for the contractor, yet they're paying, of course, this hefty fee to the contractor to do their job for them, right? And so this starts to get these people worried, right? It really starts to get them very concerned that the work that they're putting their hard-earned money towards is not going to ultimately be what they want. And then things slow down, and then more payments are requested. And unfortunately for homeowners, lots of times they don't really sign a contract, or they don't sign a contract that protects them, to where it's really the expectations are set. Like, okay, you meet this milestone, you'll get this payment. Here's how long this job will take. Here's, what I'm agreeing to do and what you're agreeing to do. And at that point in time, there's really nothing for the owner to fall back on and say, hey, I've got these rights. And they're more or less just at the mercy of negotiating with this contractor mid-job at a point where their project is starting to fall apart around them. And they're starting to see that their dreams are not being realized, and that I've hired the wrong guy. How am I going to deal with this? And they're trying to deal with the contractor on a personal level. And sometimes they all go through this up and down roller coaster kind of cycle. They come out of pocket with a more of a payment because the contractor is now demanding it because of whatever the reason is. And they think, you know what, if I make this payment to him, he'll come back. I'll keep him happy. He'll send better workers. He'll fix this thing, because that's what they're promising. Yes, give me that money and we'll have a guy there, tomorrow. They hand over that next $40,000 check and it's business as usual. And these contractors are back to doing everything that they've been doing that's gotten these owners to this point in the first place. And unfortunately, it's demoralizing for these homeowners. It really becomes, now they're feeling a little bit of shame in the decision that they've made and that they've handed more money over. And every time they hand money over, they're losing leverage. And so we encourage certainly clients to contact us as early in the process as possible when they've got any problems, but most of them figure they don't want to also bear the expense of an attorney, and they try to deal with this themselves. So, but usually there are red flags that the homeowner has seen and chosen to ignore or didn't appreciate, what that should have alerted them about the type of contractor they hired and what was going to happen. And generally, it's all about, again, communication and broken promises. And like everybody else, look, there are good communicators out there. There's some bad communicators out there, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the communication between the owner and the contractor is at the heart of all of this. And then, then you get into these project delays, and then you feel as the homeowner that, hey, now I'm going to start getting aggressive with this guy. He took my money, shame on me last time. Now this time, you know what? I'm not paying you until you do X, Y, and Z. And now the contractor kind of starts to raise the rhetoric a little bit, gets nasty, starts bullying, starts getting aggressive, yelling, screaming. And these homeowners, and especially we have a lot of clients who are single women. And these homeowners tend to be a little more susceptible to a contractor, kind of getting aggressive with them, unfortunately. And this is where, and then ultimately at the end of the day, the fallout of all this is, at some point the job essentially gets abandoned. I mean, home contractors don't show up for 90+ days. There's liens on the home, whether it's from the contractor or a sub. And ultimately, the home is practically unlivable in many respects for the homeowners. They've got little kids around, but it's like a combat zone, right? So, they're devastated financially. I've had clients who've called and said, hey, when I ask them, and I always do, tell me how this ruined project is affecting your life and the quality of your life on a day-to-day basis. My fiance moved out. We're breaking up over this. The stress that's involved. I can't sleep. I've got crazy anxiety. I'm always at the doctor, my meds. Yeah. Like we hear these things over and over, and it's got these real life implications to these people. And it's we hear these stories of these broken relationships. And of course, hey, yeah, I was planning on having Christmas here with my family, but that was last Christmas and now it's May. And, I'm hoping we even get in by next Christmas. And so it's really becomes, they're behind the 8 ball and they don't really know how to handle it. And so, so we've seen a lot of this, but I know you've seen a lot of this also. And as a matter of fact, so I want to talk about some real cases from the trenches. And I'm actually going to start, you might remember some of you spoke to Frank Coppola at the picnic where Frank asked you about some of these contractor gone wild stories.
You tell us one story about a contractor gone wild or something that went off the cards, just one highlight reel of something that sticks out on how not to do it.
Well, one of the stories that sticks out to me, it was an elderly young lady, and she had paid a unscrupulous contractor all the money ahead of time. However, that contractor did not fulfill his fiduciary responsibilities and did not follow through with the contract. So she was left not only without the money, but then she was also left with some unsafe, very difficult situations, and she was on a budget. So how we mitigated that, a group of contractors got together and passed the hat and provided the services for free. But those are some of the horror stories when people go out and enter into contracts or unscrupulous contracts.
Tell me about like a nightmare story. You've uncovered like somebody that pretended they were a contractor. Give me a story, like a nightmare story that you've.
Recently, we had a resident out in the village where I do inspections come to me and explain that her roofer seems to be ducking her, that she gave him the money and can't reach him. So they did the tear off, they did the dry in, and never called for any inspections. So she had to abandon that and change the permit and find another contractor to come in and save the day.
Yeah, sure. Tell us another one.
We have another one recently where a resident is building in a external garage. Same thing. Contractor came in, took the money, started doing the work, was tardy about getting their inspections, and disappeared, move out of state.
So if you were to give one piece of advice to a homeowner out there, what advice would you give them so that they don't find themselves in situations like this?
Absolutely, positively do your homework. Do not go with somebody just because their price seems to be the best. If it is, there's usually a reason. Make sure you do your diligence. Call DBPR, check them out. Call your local building department. Find out if this is a contractor who is in good standing, pays their insurance, make sure they renew their license, get referrals. That's usually the best.
Call the referrals, right?
Call the referrals. Hey.
If you could tell one excerpt, one highlight from a contractor gone wild, what comes to mind off the top of your head?
Contractor gone wild as a plan reviewer.
Yeah.
Contractor gone wild. Trying to submit plans that are not signed and sealed by an engineer.
And how do they try to get that by you? Do they like
I don't know what they think would happen, but they probably hope that we don't look at a sign and seal drawing, but that's probably is one of the main things. They put together a set of drawings without the engineer seal on it and hope that the building department would approve it.
Amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Now, if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody out there practicing contracting, maybe someone that doesn't have a license, that isn't a licensed contractor, what advice would you give to them?
At least first off, you need to be licensed. And once you go through that process of being licensed, you understand the responsibility that involved. And we're here to protect lives. That's the number one priority. So as a individual, get yourself licensed, and we're here to build safe structures for the
Your
residents.
head, what is your most memorable contractor gone wild story?
Contractor gone wild. Well, it would be work starting without a permit and probably coming in and slabs with no reinforcing bars and different things like that. I mean, the list is long.
All the
Okay. So you've all had these experiences also. We have a couple of other stories in here from Frank and I. I'm going to skip ahead to okay, Stonehenge. We're going to skip one sec. Okay. Here's a homeowner that Frank and I are currently helping right now.
I don't even know where to start with this one. I thought I had seen most of everything. I thought the Forever House was a story to be told. I thought the house with the pixie sticks was a story to be told. I have a new name for this one. I'm going to call it the Invisible House. Okay, nice neighborhood. So I just got back from vacation, went away 10 days ago. My last meeting was from a lovely, lovely woman who had hired a contractor to remodel and expand the bathroom in her house. It's a nice little neighborhood here. You can see, nice little neighborhood, cute little houses, right? So hires a contractor takes forever with the permits, and then calls her up and says, hey, listen, I can't do your project. You got to hire Chuck. No disrespect to anybody named Chuck out there. These are all fictitious names. So she talks to Chuck. Chuck says, hey, I can do this, no problem. They do a change of contractor over. He says, hey, by the way, listen, I looked at your plans. I think we should take this wall down in your house to make your bathroom a little bit bigger. It'll cost you an extra $80,000. But I think it's a better project. She goes, okay, signs a change order, things start, took a little longer than expected, things start moving. She goes out of state to spend time with her sister. And her neighbor, I don't know which neighbor it is here, her neighbor calls up and says, hey, I thought you were just remodeling your bathroom. We have a problem. I think you have a problem. She goes, what's that? She goes, the neighbor goes, they took down your house. This is the neighbor. And that's where the house was. I just got back from vacation. I still had all vacation. I couldn't believe it. I had to come here and see it with my own eyes. Can you imagine hiring someone to redo your bathroom, to take a wall down, and your entire house is gone? Like, the entire house is gone. Did I mention I'm sitting here. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And I want to say now I've seen everything, but I don't want to jinx it because what can you imagine? Can you imagine? I don't even know what to say.
So Chuck was unlicensed, right? Chuck in this example. So the contract Chuck found a licensed contractor to be the person to whom the permit got transferred to, and but was nowhere involved in the actual work. And so Chuck, there was discussions about, let's take this one wall down, and there was actually a discussion about making it a little bit of a bigger project, but plans had not yet been approved, and the demolition permit had not been approved, and they took down her entire house. And so now this is obviously something that's in the process of being litigated at the moment, or will shortly be a lawsuit, but we're dealing with the insurance and the attorneys and all of that. And Frank, of course, is trying to pick it up on the ground. So the And I'll talk a little bit later about this whole unlicensed contractor using a licensed guy to pull permits, because I think that's an area where, I think you guys might be able to be really helpful. All right. And then this is his second video from that house.
Hey, everybody. So where we last left, I was at this invisible house here, talking about how the contractor took down the entire house after he was supposed to just take down a wall and remodel a bathroom. So while I was here at the site, that we had the service panel here, and I noticed that the top of the service panel is cut. I was like, okay, good. That makes sense since there's no, meter in here. And then my eyes go over to the side here where I see the transformer, and I'm looking down the transformer, and there's this refrigerator in the way. So I don't see where the wires are going. So I decide to take a look, and there is nightmare fuel. So what I'm looking at, I could not believe with my own eyes. I actually called my electrician. Shout out to Lorenzo Miranda from AV2E, who's the best, who really just had to talk me off the ledge. And I get Lorenzo on video. I go, Lorenzo, those wires are live, aren't they? He goes, yeah. And we follow him down. So this literally is a death trap. I have a little plastic fence, and that somebody could freaking die by touching this, which just shows we have some unlicensed contractor here who disconnected that. I can't even imagine how much trouble, what is going to happen next. Stay tuned there. I mean, now I've seen everything.
So again, this is someone we're actually helping, and so these sorts of situations, you think, how could it ever get to this point? How does something like that even happen? With these contractors and unlicensed contractors and all that, and look, we've had conversations with folks from the DBPR about really cracking down on unlicensed contractors and those that aid and abet them, and but yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnect between them and the authorities, and the state attorneys, and how willing the state attorneys and the police and all that are willing to enforce these unlicensed contracting laws, and it's unfortunate. But so in the meantime, there's this big kind of void there about how we sort of help these people. And the last example we're going to show you is another couple we're working with.
So under the heading of a story that is so crazy, you can't make it up. I'm standing in front of the house here in an undisclosed location as to protect the innocent or the potentially guilty. But I'm standing in front of a house that has been under contract for 7 years, and they still don't have a certificate of occupancy. And yours truly got called in to come and see if we can rescue this project. And in 3 days, we sorted out with the building department a couple hurdles, and are going to get this project back on track, and with luck, get them a CO.
So here's one. It was 7 years in the making. Got to the point where the builder was going to, where there was told, where the town told the builder, you're either going to pass these 1 or 2 inspections or get another contractor in here, or we're not going to renew the permit because the permit was expiring. Now, with a home that's being built for 7 years, that meant new permit fees. That meant having to redo work that was already done because the building code had changed. And the clients had kids that were 1 and 2 when they signed the contract. And here they are 8 and 9, and they're still not living in this house. So now we were able to get them back in the house. They got the CO, and again, it's of course lawfare, right? So the things that you can observe about contractors and what really causes them to go wild, so to speak. Contractors that are undercapitalized, right? I mean, that's kind of, they're barely making ends meet. They're really struggling to sell their services and their jobs. And they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? They're taking money from one job and using it on another job, and they're misappropriating the money that's meant for specific purposes. And they play this game until they can no longer play it. And at some point, the music stops. Somebody's left without a chair to sit in, and it's those homeowners who are really hurt the most. These contractors gone wild tend to be bad managers. They're bad managers of people, and they're bad managers of expectations, and they're bad managers of processes and jobs. they are bad communicators. They are either trying to please everyone and they just don't know how to break tough or bad news to somebody. And so they don't know how to have a tough conversation, or worse, they lie, or they get aggressive, and they just don't know how to properly communicate. And that then leaves the owner start to, kind of filling this communication vacuum with all these thoughts in their head, like, hey, if this guy's not communicating with me, there's something wrong. And they start, dreaming up all these scenarios, some of which may not be true. And if really good communication from the builder would kind of, help cure that. Contractors that are generally inexperienced. This is where they don't know, what they're doing. And then they finally get this job that they think is fantastic for them because it's so much money. They haven't had a job this size before, but they don't know how to handle a job that size. And so, and they don't know when to ask for help. Just a contractor should turn to if they get a job like that, they got to partner up with a contractor who really knows what they're doing in order to have the successful job, and don't bite off more than they can chew. Look, I know as a lawyer, there are things I do and there's things I don't do, even within construction. If someone wants to develop property, if someone is, in certain things, I know to call the right people for zoning. Like that's not where I do. So, I turn to experience where I need to. There's people who underbid to get the job, obviously, right? And then that's what we were talking about before. A low price probably is a red flag. A low price that's much lower than everybody else's probably means that this contractor doesn't understand what the cost is going to be to him to do this job, and is likely to lose interest as the job goes on, and they realize, shoot, I'm not making money off of this, and this is actually costing me money. And every time I got to send somebody back, it causes them to want to, abandon the job towards the end. And then finally, you've got folks who are, opportunistic, right? These are people who just generally lack integrity. They're going to cut corners, especially when nobody is looking, right? If they pull permits, they're finding ways to deceive the homeowner. They're finding ways to deceive you. They're trying to cover up non-compliant work, or they're trying to work around, having to modify plans. We have a client who, just simple stuff, right? Like they're installing a kitchen hood in their kitchen, and it's supposed to be 1200 CFM and would need a damper, but instead they installed a 600 CFM hood that didn't need a damper so that they can get by the inspection, just to tell the owner, you know what, at the end of this job, we're going to pull it out. We're going to put the right hood back in there. And so they do these kinds of things, sometimes with the owner's knowledge, to be honest with you, but sometimes not. And so, they they think they're the smartest people in the room, and they're going to pull the wool over your eyes. And then finally, look, unethical, right? Some of these people are just, these are the criminals, right? These are the people who are the unlicensed contractors, the licensed contractors who are pulling permits for the unlicensed guys, people who take money and perform no work. That comes in, and these people aren't robbing Peter to pay Paul, they're just robbing Peter. And they're just, they're not even paying Paul. So, and then, they're desperate, like the desperation that's there with these guys are just, if they are desperate, people do desperate things. And, that causes a lot of maybe people who started out with all good intentions to make some very questionable decisions morally, ethically, and legally. And that, and unfortunately, people homeowners get victimized by that. Now, so those being the causes of contractors gone wild, the effects are really, they're kind of widespread, right? You have a lot of unpermitted work that's around, work that gets by without inspections. People who, again, are financially devastated. They've got, the emotionally, mentally, the stress, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, illness, from all of that stress, dangerous and unsafe conditions out there. And then, look, it kind of flows downhill. Subs that don't get paid, suppliers that don't get paid, and people are left having to pay twice. Paid the contractor, now I got to pay the sub, got to pay the supplier because they don't know the proper way to make payments. There's a real, like I said, a lack of education out there. So when it comes to building officials, though, I've got some ideas on some of the things that you guys do that kind of, I don't want to say contribute, but maybe enable some of these contractors, or they've got you figured out so they can, they kind of try to pull the wool over your eyes. But then also opportunities. I think you guys have to be the hero in a lot of these situations. But I'm curious, maybe, what some of your pain points are as a building official when it comes to just the job that you're doing every day, the things that you find frustrating in dealing with owners or contractors and all of that. If you wouldn't mind sharing with me, I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
I think my number one frustration would be owner pulling the permits for unlicensed contractors.
Okay. So I know when they go ahead and they do an owner builder, right? So they've got this document they have to sign that affirms, right, that they're gonna hire somebody licensed, right? Okay. And so you encounter something like that in the field, or do you get the info, do you know who it is that they've hired in those situations, or you're not really sure?
A lot of times, you know, it's unlicensed contracting, but there's not a lot you can do legally because the owner builder is the one who's actually responsible.
Sure.
And the contractor of record, and it's up to them
Mhm.
to hire, you know, licensed or qualified people to do it. When a problem starts turning south, that's when they come and ask for our help. And there's not a lot you can do
Right,
at that point.
right. Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
So our wonderful legislators decided a couple of years ago that we're no longer require a copy of the contract as part of in order to issue a permit.
Yeah,
So we require a copy of a cost estimate with, that shows the scope of work.
mm-hmm,
So 9 out of 10 times they send us the contract.
okay,
So what we'll do is, that's when we sometimes we'll see that the contractor applying for the permit is different than they were dumb enough to send us the estimate from the unlicensed contractor.
Right.
At which point we say, you can't do this, that's just gotta be, we try to notify the homeowner. And 9 out of 10 times, they just send us a new cost estimate from the actual qualifier,
okay,
because he wants his money.
right,
And we have no idea who's doing the actual work.
Hmm.
So it's very difficult to control the situation when it's happening, but it happens a ton because it's very common. It's more common than I think most municipalities, where the licensed contractors are aiding and abetting because they're making money, because they're hiring, and they're going, no, he's my business partner.
Right.
You don't qualify his business.
Mhm.
Yes, his business is in Sundays,
Mhm.
but you don't qualify it. You're not an officer in his, it doesn't, you know, so you can't do this.
Mhm.
And I've actually had that situation where I've actually handed the whole thing over to DDPNR, even
Yeah.
showing the estimate come from, and it went nowhere.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of time.
That's the frustrating part about it, because that's the kind of thing that you're all in the perfect position to observe and see and report. And it is really, I would certainly encourage you to continue to report it, even if nothing happens, or historically nothing has happened. That is one of the things that, you know, I identify later as being, you know, something. And I think we just need to all who are in this position need to continue to do that. And at some point, we're going to need to break through legislatively, of course, to, you know, but until then, I understand the frustration.
Yeah, you can have all the rules and regulations you want for DDPNR, but if you never enforce them, they're not relevant.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Two situations, next, the first one is an absentee contractor. I actually had a situation once where I continually got expired anyways from the office.
Mhm.
When I called the office, the girl who was submitting, you know, saying, oh, you submitted this to all the building departments and everybody accepted. I don't know why you can't accept. So I'm trying to explain to her, there's a change of the building code. These documents are expired, these updated documents. She couldn't understand. I said, you know what, let me talk to your qualifier.
Mhm.
She said, what qualifier? Gave her the name of the person. She said, that person doesn't work here. Right?
Yeah, right.
And I also have other situations where like the contractor or the pool contractor in this situation would have multiple clerks that manage jobs
Mhm.
and absent.
Right.
So you have clerks in the office and they're the ones that are doing all the work and they do not understand code. And they're just, again, just trying to please the homeowner.
Mhm.
They're selling stuff that they are not supposed to sell. They're selling shutters, outdoor kitchens.
Right.
You know, pay a year.
Yep, outside the scope of
Outside
any
of the
license,
scope
yeah.
of what they can do.
Right.
And, you know, again, they feel empowered, to
Mhm.
do that kind of thing. That's the first one. The second one is you have a contractor submit, exemption for workers' compensation.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So ideally, this person should be the only person working on this project.
Right.
And we go do inspections, and then there are multiple other trades and other people working at that job site and being paid by that contractor as per the homeowner, right?
Mhm.
We we really are powerless to do anything.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask actually, is sort of what is available to you to do in a situation like
We are
that.
powerless.
Yeah.
We can't do it.
Thing you can do is call it's common.
They'll come out.
Okay, they do
They
come
come
out.
out real quick.
Yeah.
Workman's comp.
Do you find that you're viewed more generally as adversaries rather than sort of partners in these kind of projects, you know, as far as how the owners or contractors treat you?
It depends on where. In the beginning, we're adversaries, but when they get into trouble, we're partners.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, I totally get it. So here, so I'll tell you that, you know, when we hear from these homeowners, there are, sometimes they're complaining to us about the building officials, right? You know, and they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what your job is and what you're responsible to do. And so part of that is to, you know, is for me to, you know, educate them on what it is that you do. And then some of the things that they observe that, the contractors seem to do to, you know, kind of get around you guys or manipulate you guys. It was the one issue I spoke of earlier about, you know, installing something and then, you know, kind of removing it after the fact. But inspections that take place by video, by FaceTime, tends to be one of the biggest complaints I hear from homeowners. And you know, look, and I'm sure some of your other pain points, if we talked about it enough, would be your time, staffing, you know, how your overload of the caseload and all of that, and how overworked and all of that. And I understand that this is the type of thing that can, you know, save some time. It tends to be that we get a disproportionate number of cases and clients who will come in and say, hey, you know, they did this, you know, they passed this inspection by a video or by FaceTime, and yet, you know, the contractor didn't show them everything there was to see. And the contractor during these things will show you what they kind of want to show you, and it was things you'd be able to observe if you were actually there, you know, that you don't really get the perspective of when you're doing these things by FaceTime. And, you know, look, when you do these inspections in person, you're at the right place at the right time to, you know, kind of notice when a project is, you know, about to kind of go off the rails. Another thing that really gets, you know, I know you guys, you know, can certainly have your basis for relying on these. And this happens, this seems to happen more with roofs than anything else, right? Where for some reason inspections weren't called in as the roof is being constructed, and it's not really till the end that if an inspection's initially called. And then now there's a, you know, hey, my contractor got some letter from a buddy and gave it in and handed it in, and now, you know, they took their word for it. But, you know, I have no way to know that in fact the roof was, you know, constructed properly, underlayment, et cetera. So, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, these are necessarily good or bad things, or that you're doing anything wrong by doing this. These are just the kind of areas, though, that I think these contractors can manipulate and get through the system when they haven't really done things the right way. And the homeowner ends up with a lot of questions and concerns about that. And so, you know, it's just things I think you should all be aware of what when we hear from the homeowners. And then, you know, look, like I said, you know, you guys are in a position to, you know, to help prevent these lawfare situations from spiraling out of control. And one of them is kind of what I was talking about before, I think, which is, you know, communicating with and educating owners. And I'm curious, do you find that the owners generally don't really want to know or seek information and advice from you unless or until things have gone way sideways?
Or even when we go into events at, you know, building expos or at
Yeah.
a fair, typically, in my experience, all they want to talk to me about is code violations. I'm like, that's not my department, you know?
Yeah.
We can talk to you about other things, but they hear building department and they're like, oh, I had a code enforcement officer. I'm like, that's not what we're here to talk about.
Right.
But, you know, we can help you out
Yeah.
with other things, what you need a permit for, what you don't need a permit for. But, I mean, and with that video,
Mhm.
it's the contractor that chooses to do the video. So
Yeah.
shouldn't the homeowner, I mean, that needed to be a conversation between them. That's not the building department's fault.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting it's your fault, right? Yeah, but you're right. And the thing is that comes back to communication again between the owner and the contractor, and you know the contractor's going to act that way. You know, I mean that they're just trying to get through it, and you know, regardless of the effect on the homeowner.
And many times, more often than not, prior to that marriage between the contractor and the homeowner dissolve, especially with owner builders, what I see, many of them are coached prior to coming in. So they kind of know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And now when that dissolves or something goes away, that's when you start to find out what was the real intent and how
Yeah.
that marriage came. But a lot of times they're coached prior to even walking in the door.
Yeah, and it's too bad. I think you're right, and I think it's too bad because really the homeowner, and I do this with people who come in. Not everyone needs to hire a lawyer every day, and a lot of people we talk to, this is the first time in their lives they've ever needed a lawyer, and they don't know what to expect. They don't know what they don't know. So it's my job as the lawyer to explain to them what it's like to work with a lawyer, what you can expect from working with my law firm, and kind of be the tour guide, if you will, of the process and what we do. Similarly, I wish there was a great opportunity, a point in time where there would be a real great opportunity for you all to have those similar conversations with owners so they can understand, and like you pointed out, right, at these conventions or whatever, you have a booth, you have a tape, they don't really even take the opportunity to understand it. They'd rather just look at the new dishwasher at the, or whatever it is that they're there to see. And yeah, so this was an interesting thing we talked about a minute ago about whether you can require or request, right, a copy of the contract. As far as the legislation is concerned, if I understood, I wasn't sure that they forbid you from requesting it, right? Or is it your understanding they forbid you, or you just don't need to?
Shall not.
Shall not. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. All right. Interesting. But I do like what you chose to do in that one instance with what they
We just don't
give you.
follow the contract and they send us the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So, in situations like that, when you see something, I hope that you do continue to say something, because I think enough of this to present it to the DBPR will hopefully get them to take things more seriously, for sure. And then, hey, evaluating the work, please be firm. Please don't feel pressure to, do, pass things that shouldn't be passing, and I know, again, there's this kind of push and pull between the speed at which these jobs everyone wants to get them done versus it being done correctly. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, for the sake of the homeowners, getting it done correctly is better than getting it done quickly. So that's basically what I have for you. And, and I hope we really appreciate everything you do. I know I do, in the protection of homeowners. I'd love to, if you have a couple questions, I'm happy to field them.
Actually, for maybe just to help somebody out, previous jurisdiction I was with, we had, you gotta love, nothing bothers me more than when somebody goes to Home Depot, expected to get a great job from a licensed contractor, reputable contractor, and all that. So I had 50 open permits from the Home Depot qualifier. Who, by the way, was licensed in Florida, but lived in Georgia. Didn't know the guy never set foot anywhere near. All right, so my thought process was, well, I can't not issue, I'm forbidden to not issue this guy more permits. There's nothing stopping me, it's actually say I can't do it. I ended up writing him a letter basically saying, look, if you don't close out the permits, get your inspections, reopen them, get the inspections, close them, I'm gonna cite you for unsafe work on every project. On my unsafe building.
Right.
And that's what finally got action from him. Cause I had people that they're trying to get the permit closed, they couldn't get insurance, they couldn't get, the work finished, there was minor trim and things like that that had to be done, and it was getting accepted. So sometimes you gotta kind of go around sideways to attack the problem.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a benefit for people making license complaints on the county level? And whether or not that affects their ability some of these contractors' abilities to continue to pull permits, did ever result get that far? I'll take that as a no. Okay. All right. All right.
Can we give it up again for Mr. Wyman?
Thank you.
And we have a token of our appreciation.
Oh, fantastic.
For the knowledge as well. We like to.
Awesome.
From our education committee.
All right.
As well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And as well.
I'll even-
as for
I'll
Frank
even
as
take
well.
one for Frank, sure.
Okay. And.
Guys, let's tighten it up. Tighten it up, ready? 1, 2, 6. One more? All right, we're good.
Thank you.
All right.
What's next?
All right.
Thanks, a great.
Hey, man, thank you. Of course, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you very much. Hey, Debbie, anything Wyman?
And before we